In 1969, NASA Mission Control Room fell silent, not because something went wrong, but because something became obsolete. The rows of women who calculated every decimal point of human spaceflight simply clocked out for the last time, their profession erased by a machine. In 1930, the Harvard Observatory employed 17 women to map the stars. They sat in a single room on Concord Avenue, pencils moving across graph paper in synchronized rhythm, each one responsible for a portion of the night sky that no human eye had yet carefully measured. Their job had a name: computer. Not a machine, a person, a mathematician. By the 1950s, there were hundreds of them. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena kept an entire floor dedicated to computation. The Naval Ordnance Laboratory in White Oak, Maryland, established in 1942, employed dozens. Insurance companies needed them. Military contractors needed them. NASA, founded in 1958, would soon need more computers than had ever been gathered in one place. They were mostly women. Not by accident. The work required precision, patience, and speed in equal measure, qualities that hiring committees believed women possessed naturally. The pay was modest. The work was repetitive. The stakes were absolute. A single arithmetic error could send a missile hundreds of miles off course. A miscalculation in stellar position could waste months of observatory time. They worked with logarithm tables, slide rules, and mechanical adding machines the size of typewriters. A single complex calculation, determining the trajectory of a spacecraft or predicting a lunar eclipse, might require weeks of work distributed among a team. One woman would compute the first step. Her result moved down the row. Another woman would use it for step 2. And so on. The architecture of human computation was assembly line mathematics. They called themselves computers. They had business cards that said so. They belonged to professional societies. They published papers. This was not secretarial work. This was mathematics as labor, scaled to industrial proportions. But by 1965, something strange was happening in the offices where computers worked. The electronic kind were arriving, and nobody yet understood what they would actually replace. By 1954, the first IBM 650 computer, the size of a grand piano, weighing 5 tons, had been installed at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. It could perform 1,300 floating-point operations per second. Human computers, working in perfect silence, could manage perhaps one calculation per minute. Nobody said it aloud yet, but the math was obvious. The warnings came early. In 1946, Princeton mathematician John von Neumann had published the architecture for modern electronic computers. By 1952, UNIVAC, the first general-purpose electronic computer sold commercially, had correctly predicted the Eisenhower landslide. Newspaper photographers snapped pictures of the machine. Nobody photographed the human computers anymore. At NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, the computing pool expanded even as mechanization accelerated. More women were hired in 1955, 1956, 1957. They were not told they were being hired into a dying profession. The paychecks came. The work continued. New recruits arrived from Howard University and other black colleges, young women brilliant enough to execute orbital mechanics by hand, just as the electronic machines were learning to do it faster. By 1958, IBM had released the 704 computer. It could run Fortran code. It was fast. It was reliable. It required no lunch breaks, no sick days, no negotiations over pay. The first cracks appeared not in the machines, but in the reasoning of the people who managed them. In private meetings at JPL, at Langley, at the Naval Ordnance Test Station, at China Lake, administrators began asking a question that had not been asked before. Why keep paying 50 women when one machine could do their work? The answer was always the same. And nobody, not the computers themselves, not their supervisors, not the government officials who signed the paychecks, had any plan for what would happen next. In 1965, IBM delivered the System/360 to NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. Within 5 years, the profession was gone. The numbers tell the story of an extinction event. In 1960, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory employed over 150 human computers. By 1967, that number had dropped to 40. By 1970, it was 0. No goodbye parties were documented. No plaques were mounted. The women simply stopped coming to work because there was no work left. The transition wasn't smooth. At the Naval Weapons Laboratory in Dahlgren, Virginia, electronic computers initially produced answers that disagreed with hand calculations, wildly sometimes. The human computers had to verify the machines. For a brief window, around 1966 to 1968, the old profession experienced a strange resurrection. Its purpose was to prove that human judgment was obsolete. Then the machines improved, and the verification jobs vanished too. By 1969, when Apollo 11 launched toward the moon, every calculation had been performed electronically. Not a single pencil and paper computer was involved in getting humans to the lunar surface, the achievement that had once been the profession's reason for existing. The irony was precise and complete. Some women retrained. Some retired early. Some took clerical positions in the same institutions that no longer needed their mathematical minds. Personnel records from this period are sparse. Many institutions simply did not document what happened to their computing staff. The profession dissolved so quickly that historians would later struggle to account for thousands of careers that simply ended. What nobody anticipated, what the computers themselves never discussed in the limited interviews that survive, was whether they saw it coming. Whether they understood, while sitting at their desks in 1965, that they were already obsolete. By 1970, the job no longer existed. Not gradually, not with ceremony. It simply ceased. The U.S. Census Bureau stopped listing computer as an occupational category after the 1960 census. NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, which had employed over 400 human computers at its peak in 1965, reduced that workforce to fewer than 50 by 1968. Insurance companies like Prudential and Equitable Life, which had relied on entire floors of calculators, closed those departments within months of acquiring their first IBM System/360 machines. By 1972, the profession was archaeologically complete. Not a single person in America held the title professionally. Women bore the disappearance most acutely. Unlike male engineers and mathematicians who often transitioned into programming roles, female computers were rarely offered those positions. The historical record is blunt here. Programming, suddenly prestigious and well-compensated, went to men. Women computers were thanked and released. Some found work as programmers anyway, teaching themselves Fortran and COBOL in their spare time. Most simply left. Beverly Eckert, who had worked at Aberdeen Proving Ground during World War II, calculating artillery trajectories, spoke once, in a 1997 oral history, about the sudden irrelevance. She didn't say she saw it coming. She said, one day you were essential. The next day you were a relic. The profession vanished so completely that within 15 years, most people forgot it had ever existed. Textbooks rewrote the history of computing to begin with machines. Universities stopped teaching by hand. The cognitive art, the precise discipline of maintaining accuracy across hundreds of intermediate steps, became worthless overnight. What remained was a single urgent question that nobody could quite answer. What exactly had been lost when speed replaced skill? Today, almost nothing remains of the human-computer profession except scattered traces. A few photographs survive in the archives of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena and the Harvard Observatory. A 1961 NASA payroll ledger lists 273 computers by name. Katherine Johnson's desk at Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia still exists. A wooden table, a mechanical calculator, a stack of paper yellowed to the color of old bone. But the vast majority of the work itself, the hand-calculated trajectories for Atlas rockets, the logarithmic tables for the Nautical Almanac, the differential equations that guided Friendship 7 into orbit in February 1962, all of it was simply discarded or typed over or burned. What we lost was not just a profession, but a form of knowledge. The human computers did not merely execute algorithms. They caught errors. They sensed when an answer was implausible. They understood the shape of the mathematics they performed. A machine can compute faster, but speed, it turned out, had a price. By 1975, the skill was extinct. By 1985, it was nearly forgotten. The few surviving computers, Johnson died in 2020 at age 101, carried the memory alone. And then one interviewer, decades later, asked a simple question that stopped everyone cold. Did we ever ask what the machines could not do that the humans could? A profession born from necessity and genius vanished almost overnight, leaving behind only photographs and paychecks. Another file is already open. The mathematicians whose names were never recorded, whose calculations sent men to the moon. If you're drawn to forgotten histories, subscribe to the archive.